My name is Charlotte Pierce, and for 21 years, I've been the wife of Grant Pierce, the man Dallas calls a king. His name is etched onto skyscrapers, splashed across glossy magazines, whispered in real estate circles like a promise. Of power to the world, we are the perfect couple. Grant, the mogul who built an empire from nothing, and me, the poised wife who stands at his side, smiling in photographs, hosting charity galas, playing my part with practiced grace. But perfection is a mask, and masks always crack at first. I told myself the late-night meetings were just business. That the unexplained trips to Houston and Austin were for investors, not her. I swallowed his excuses, the way good wives in my circle always do, nodding, smiling, keeping quiet over wine at luncheons while the other women gossiped about affairs and divorces. I told myself Grant wasn't like them, that he would never humiliate me like that. I was wrong. The truth arrived in fragments. A shirt from the cleaners with a faint lipstick stain, not my shade. A receipt for a dinner charged for 2 in a hotel restaurant 3 hours away. A phone that buzzed late at night with a name I didn't recognize. Sienna Brooksett was a name that kept coming back over and over. At first, it meant nothing. Then, slowly, I began to hear it in whispers. A young interior designer making waves in Dallas society. Blonde, ambitious, barely 30. The kind of woman who smiles too brightly, leans too close, and believes she can take what she wants if she only plays her part well enough. I still remember the night it became undeniable. The Winslow Hotel, a ballroom filled with diamonds, champagne, and soft laughter. I arrived late, my navy silk gown trailing behind me, my pearls catching the light. I scanned the crowd for Grant, ready to slip into the role of the elegant hostess. And there he was, my husband, my partner, my king, leaning just a little too close to her. To Sienna, her hand rested on his sleeve, her laugh spilling into his ear, and for a moment, I swear the world tilted. People saw. I know they did. Whispers circled the room like smoke, the wronged wife, the mistress flaunted in public, and Grant didn't even flinch. He smiled, poured her a drink, carried on as if I had ceased to exist. I held my glass so tightly I thought it might shatter, but I did not cry. I did not scream. I smiled. I nodded. I played my role because appearances are everything in this city. Dallas loves its scandals, but it loves silence more. That night, when we returned to the Pierce estate, a stone mansion in Highland Park that symbolized everything we had built, I waited until Grant went to his study for calls. Then I slipped into his office. He was careless, always had been. Powerful men often are. The drawer wasn't even locked. Inside, I found what I had been dreading: hotel receipts, credit card bills, signed wire transfers. One document froze me in place: a payment to Sienna's design company. $50,000. Labeled as a consulting fee. I nearly laughed. It wasn't just an affair. It was an investment. A foundation for a future without me. I sat there under the glow of the desk lamp, my hands shaking as I held the evidence. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. It felt as though the walls of the mansion had caved in around me, the air pressed out of my lungs. 21 years of loyalty, of compromise, of smiling through clenched teeth for the cameras. All of it disposable. I wasn't his partner anymore. I was an obstacle. I could have screamed. I could have stormed into his study and thrown the papers in his face. I could have shattered the illusion right then and there, but I didn't. Because in that moment, something inside me shifted. The grief, the humiliation, the white-hot rage, they all froze. What replaced them wasn't fire, it was ice, a cold, sharp clarity I had never felt before. Grant thought I was weak. He thought I would crumble, play the victim, fade quietly into the background while he built a new life with his mistress. He was wrong. I returned every document to its place, smoothed the drawer shut, and slipped back into our bedroom. When he finally came to bed hours later, smelling faintly of a perfume that wasn't mine, I lay on my side, eyes closed, breathing slow and steady. He never knew I was awake. He never knew I had seen everything, as the first light of morning crept. Through the curtains, I stared at the ceiling and made myself a promise I would not confront him. I would not weep or beg or fight for scraps of his attention. No. My revenge would be quieter, colder, the kind that doesn't just cut, it erases. Grant Pierce may believe he holds the power in this marriage, but by the time I am done, he will learn the truth. The empire he built with me by his side will crumble without me. The fortune he thinks will buy him a new future will vanish, and the woman he parades so proudly will end up with nothing but ashes. After that night in Grant's office, I made a choice, one that would define every step that followed. I decided to become what he expected me to be. If Grant thought I was broken, I would be broken. If he believed I was weak, I would bend beneath the weight of his betrayal. If he wanted me invisible, I would disappear in plain sight. And all the while, beneath the mask, I would be watching, calculating, preparing. The art of survival begins with silence, so I played the role. At breakfast the next morning, I sat across from him in the sunlit kitchen, hands wrapped around a coffee, mug as though it was the only thing holding me together. I let my eyes look tired, rimmed in the kind of red that suggested a night of tears. He barely looked at me as he read his emails, clicking through stock updates and market reports. Another late night? I asked softly, my voice fragile, the way women sound in old black and white movies. He didn't notice the sharp edge beneath it. He grunted something about contracts in Houston. I nodded, as if I believed him, and lowered my gaze. It was almost too easy. Over the next weeks, I perfected the performance. When he came home late, I didn't question. I sat curled on the couch, a forgotten novel in my lap, eyes vacant with a sadness that seemed bottomless. When he left early, for meetings, I kissed his cheek with trembling lips, whispering, "Don't work too hard." He grew bolder. Grant started taking Sienna to events that once belonged to me. At luncheons, women would exchange glances, pretending not to pity me. Some even leaned in with gentle, poisonous whispers. "You deserve better, Charlotte. Don't let him treat you this way." I only smiled weakly, playing the part of the dutiful wife clinging to denial. It was humiliating, yes, but necessary. The more pitiful I appeared, the less anyone suspected I was capable of striking back. Sienna thrived on my silence. I'd see her in society pages, her blonde hair perfect, her lips curved in a triumphant smile as she stood beside my husband. She believed she was winning, that soon my place in Grant's world would be hers, that she would inherit not just the man, but the wealth, the power, the empire. I let her believe it. In fact, I encouraged it. At one fundraiser she dared to approach me. We stood in the same circle of donors, the air thick with money and champagne, and she looked at me with the smug superiority of a woman who thinks she's already taken everything. "Charlotte," she said sweetly, her hand brushing Grant's sleeve like a claim. "You look tired. You really should take some time for yourself. Grant works so hard. He deserves someone who can keep up." I could feel the eyes on me, waiting for a scene, waiting for me to break. Instead, I smiled. Thin, fragile, exactly the way she expected. "You're right," I whispered. "Grant does deserve more than I can give these days. I suppose I should be grateful he has company." Her victory glowed in her eyes. She thought she had crushed me. She never realized I was memorizing the way she carried herself, how she wielded her influence, how she underestimated me with every condescending word. That night, I poured myself a glass of red wine and sat by the bedroom window, staring out at the city skyline. Dallas glittered with its towers of glass and steel, the monuments of men like Grant who believed themselves gods. But even towers fall. Grant believed I was fading into the background, that I was too weak, too blind, too broken to act. What he didn't understand was that masks are powerful. Behind mine, I was building something colder than anger. I was gathering my strength, waiting for the perfect moment, every sympathetic whisper from friends, every smug glance from Sienna, every careless word from Grant. They were bricks in the foundation of the plan I was quietly laying. He thought he was preparing to leave me, but really I was preparing to leave him first. Not with tears or pleas, but with silence and precision. By the time the mask slipped and my true face was revealed, it would already be too late. Grant Pierce would never see me coming. The first rule of revenge is patience. The second is silence. Grant saw only the mask, the fragile wife, too broken to fight. But when he was away with Sienna, when the mansion stood quiet and I was alone, that mask slipped. Beneath it, I was sharper than I had ever been. The moment had come to take action. I called Robert King. Robert wasn't just any attorney, he was an old family friend, a man who had known me since before the Pierce name was worth anything. He had seen me raise Grant's children, host his galas, stand by his side through decades of ambition. More importantly, Robert knew how ruthless Grant could be in business. He had fought his battles in boardrooms and courtrooms, and he knew the darker corners of the empire my husband built. We met in his office on a rainy Thursday afternoon. The windows were streaked with water, the city skyline blurred behind them. Robert studied me across his mahogany desk, his brow furrowed. "Charlotte," he said gently, "if you're here to talk about divorce, I can help you get a fair settlement. But you know Grant. He'll fight." I leaned forward, my voice calm, steady. "I don't want a settlement, Robert. I want everything." For a moment, he simply stared at me. And then, slowly, the corners of his mouth lifted in something that wasn't quite a smile. "Then we'll need to be clever." And clever we were. The plan unfolded like a chess game. Piece by piece, I began moving what had once been ours into mine alone. Properties that bore both our names were quietly reassigned. Trusts meant for future heirs were rewritten under my control. Bank accounts shifted ownership with signatures Grant never realized I still had access to. Every paper trail, every deed, every contract, rewoven with the precision of a spider spinning her web. Grant had grown careless over the years. He believed his empire untouchable, his lawyers loyal only to him. But arrogance is the enemy of vigilance, and I knew exactly where the cracks were. Robert and I worked quietly, methodically. Each week, I'd arrive at his office under some social pretense. Lunch, with a friend, a charity meeting, and leave with documents tucked neatly into my leather bag. At night, while Grant texted Sienna from the study, I would sit in the library, reviewing papers beneath the glow of a single lamp. My hands no longer trembled. My heart no longer raced. I was steady now. Cold. Certain. One night, as I signed a stack of amendments transferring a trust into my sole name, I paused and stared at the signature, Charlotte Pierce. How many times had I written that name as a dutiful wife? But tonight, the letters looked different. Harder, sharper. They didn't belong to the woman who smiled silently at galas. They belonged to the woman taking back her power. The plan wasn't just taking the money, it was making sure Grant never saw it coming. If I struck too soon, he could fight back, undo the work. But if I waited, if I let him believe the stage was set for his glorious future with Sienna, then the trap would close with devastating precision. The thought of his face when he realized, when the bank accounts were empty, the properties out of reach, the inheritance gone, it fueled me. Not with joy, not with cruelty, but with justice. Because this was never just about betrayal, it was about erasure. He had erased me from his life in every way that mattered. Now, I would erase him from everything he thought he owned. Robert warned me once, as he handed me another stack of contracts. "This isn't just strategy, Charlotte. This is war. And once it starts, there's no going back." I met his eyes, steady as stone. It started the moment he chose her. From that night forward, my mask became more convincing. Around Grant, I grew quieter, more withdrawn. Around Sienna, I allowed myself to look small, defeated. She preened in her victory, never realizing she was being played as surely as Grant was. Behind closed doors, though, I was building my new life. Not a life of scraps and settlements, but one of power and independence. One that would leave Grant, pierced with nothing but the ashes of the empire he had once ruled. The mask was still in place, but it no longer felt heavy. It felt like armor, and soon, very soon, the time would come to remove it. It happened on a Tuesday evening, as ordinary as any other. Grant had just returned from what he called a business trip to Austin. His suitcase sat by the door, his tie loosened, his face lit with that restless energy I'd come to recognize. It was the look of a man on the edge of a decision. I poured him a drink, neat, the way he liked it. The amber liquid caught the light as I handed it to him. He took it without meeting my eyes, swirling it absently before setting it down on the coffee table. "Charlotte," he began, his voice measured, as though he were delivering a speech to investors. "We need to talk." I folded my hands in my lap, tilting my head slightly, a picture of fragile patience. Inside, my heart pounded, but not from fear, from anticipation. "I've tried to keep this from you for as long as I could," he continued, sighing like a man burdened by the weight of honesty. "But it's not fair anymore, not to you, not to me." I stayed silent. Silence, I had learned, is a weapon sharper than words. He glanced away, then back, his jaw tightening. "I'm in love with someone else. Her name is Sienna. You've probably figured it out." The words hung in the air, thick and sour. He watched me carefully, waiting for tears, for outrage, for a dramatic scene that would absolve him of guilt. Instead, I lowered my gaze, letting my shoulders slump ever so slightly. "I see," I whispered, my voice trembling just enough to sound believable. He leaned forward, emboldened by my apparent weakness. "Charlotte, you deserve better than a husband who can't give you all of himself. I've already spoken with my attorneys about filing for divorce. I'll make sure you're taken care of. You'll want for nothing." Want for nothing. The arrogance of that promise almost made me laugh. But I didn't laugh. I didn't argue. I didn't remind him that every property, every account, every trust had already been quietly shifted from beneath his grasp. Instead, I lifted my chin, meeting his eyes with a watery smile. "If she makes you happy, Grant, then I won't stand in your way." The relief that washed over his face was almost insulting. He had expected a fight, a storm, maybe even a breakdown. What he got instead was surrender, and he believed it. "Thank you, Charlotte," he said, his voice softening. He even reached for my hand, squeezing it like a man who thought he had earned forgiveness. "You've always been so understanding. That's what I've always admired about you." I nodded faintly, slipping my hand from his grasp. "I only want you to be happy." The truth was, I wanted him to be destroyed. That night, after he went to bed, I stood at the window of our Highland Park mansion, staring out at the glittering Dallas skyline. He believed he was walking into a future with Sienna, free of me, free of the weight of a 21-year marriage. What he didn't realize was that he had already stepped into a cage, and I held the key. The accounts he promised would take care of me, emptied, the properties he thought he'd split between us, signed into my sole ownership, the inheritance he assumed Sienna would one day enjoy, rewritten, locked, unreachable. Grant Pierce believed he had just freed himself, but in truth he had just sentenced himself, and when the moment came for him to discover the truth, I wanted to be there. I wanted to see the flicker of realization in his eyes when he finally understood that the wife he had dismissed, underestimated, and betrayed was the one who had outplayed him from the start. For now, though, I stayed quiet. I played the part. I let him walk into Sienna's arms with a smile on his lips and arrogance in his stride, because revenge isn't about striking first, it's about striking last. Grant moved out within a week. It was almost comical, watching him pack his tailored suits and monogrammed cufflinks into sleek leather bags, humming as though he were a young man starting fresh instead of a middle-aged husband discarding 21 years of marriage. Sienna waited for him, no doubt perched in her loft apartment with champagne chilling, ready to welcome him into the life she believed was finally hers. He didn't even look back as he closed the door behind him. That suited me just fine. For the first time in weeks, the mansion felt quiet, clean, free of his arrogance. I moved through the rooms like a ghost, calm, steady, certain. I knew it wouldn't be long before the first cracks appeared in his new world. It happened sooner than I expected. 3 days after he left, I received a call, not from Grant, of course, but from one of our mutual bankers. His tone was hesitant, almost confused. "Mrs. Pierce, I just wanted to confirm. The transfers we processed last month, those were all legitimate? Yes, I answered smoothly, the corner of my lips curving. Everything was in order. There was a pause. Then I imagine Mr. Pierce must already be aware. I smiled into the silence. I'm sure he will be, very soon. And he was. Grant's first shock came when he tried to access one of our joint accounts to pay for the new condo he promised Sienna. The balance, once 7 figures, was empty. Confused, he tried another. And another. Each one the same, frozen, shifted, untouchable. I could picture the panic rising in his chest, the disbelief hardening into rage. But still, he thought it was a mistake, a glitch. Money doesn't simply disappear, not for men like Grant Pierce. He didn't realize yet that money is only power when you know who truly holds the pen. Sienna, of course, was less patient. She called me 2 days later, her voice sharp, brittle with fury. What the hell did you do? I let my tone drip with feigned confusion. Sienna? I'm not sure what you mean. Don't play dumb with me. The accounts. The properties. He promised. He swore. Everything would be his. Ours. I allowed a soft laugh to escape. One I knew would sting. Oh, Sienna. Did you really think I would make it that easy? She cursed and hung up, and I knew without doubt the cracks in their golden dream had already begun to split wide open. The second blow came when Grant tried to access the trust fund, one he had intended to dangle before Sienna as proof of his undying commitment. What he found instead was my name. Only my name. The documents had been rewritten weeks ago, Robert ensuring every line was ironclad, and then came the properties. The Highland Park mansion remained mine, of course, but so too did the lake house. In Austin, the condo in Chicago, the vineyard estate in Napa. Grant's signatures were worthless now. Every deed had been altered, reassigned. By the end of the week, he wasn't just shocked, he was furious. I know because he stormed into the mansion one night, his face red, his tie askew, his arrogance finally cracking. What the hell have you done, Charlotte? He spat, slamming his hand against the marble counter. Those accounts were mine. Those properties were mine. I lifted my wine glass, calm as ice. Correction, Grant. They were ours. And now, they're mine. His jaw clenched. You can't do this. I'll fight you in court. You'll what? I interrupted softly. Drag your mistress into the spotlight? Parade her in front of the judge as evidence of why you deserve sympathy? Or perhaps you'll explain why you transferred $50,000 of marital funds into her company as a consulting fee. The color drained from his face. I set my glass down, my smile sharp. Be careful, Grant. You might find you've lost more than just your fortune. He left in silence that night, but I knew it wouldn't be the end. Men like Grant don't accept defeat easily. But it didn't matter. The money was gone, the inheritance secured, the empire dismantled, and Sienna? She lasted exactly 2 more weeks. By then, the glitter of stolen luxury had dulled into dust. I heard from a friend, through whispers at a luncheon, that Sienna had been seen at another man's side already, her laughter just as bright, her hand resting on a new sleeve. Grant Pierce was no longer a king. He was a man abandoned, humiliated, and broke. And I was just getting started. The Pierce name once commanded respect in every boardroom in Dallas. Now it was a curse whispered behind closed doors. It didn't take long for the vultures to circle. Business rivals smelled blood the moment they realized Grant's accounts were dry, his properties no longer his, and his supposed empire was crumbling. Deals fell through overnight. Partners withdrew. Investors demanded answers he couldn't give. And then came the lawsuits. A contractor in Houston claimed unpaid invoices. A developer in Austin accused Grant of breaching contracts. Small debts he had ignored for years suddenly grew teeth when everyone realized he was no longer untouchable. The first summons arrived on a Thursday morning, hand-delivered to the condo he had rented with what little remained of his pride. I know because he called me that afternoon, furious, desperate, his voice hoarse with rage. You tipped them off, didn't you? You've been feeding them. I let the silence stretch before answering, calm as ever. I don't need to tip. Anyone off, Grant. You've made enough enemies on your own. He cursed, slammed the phone down, and that was the last time he called me. But I wasn't finished. Robert and I had discussed it weeks earlier, over a quiet dinner in his office. The tax irregularities, the shell accounts Grant used to shuffle money between deals, the creative bookkeeping he thought no one would notice. He was sloppy, arrogant, always believing he was smarter than the system. All it took was a carefully placed envelope, a few copies of documents, an anonymous delivery to the IRS offices downtown. By the following month, Grant was under investigation for tax fraud. His name, once emblazoned on towers of glass, was plastered across headlines with words like criminal and embezzlement attached. Dallas society, ever eager for gossip, feasted on his downfall. And through it all, Sienna vanished. One day she was on his arm, the next she was gone. I heard whispers that she had taken up with a younger athlete, her Instagram flooded with photos from Cabo and Miami. Not a trace of Grant remained in her world. She had squeezed him dry and discarded him like an empty bottle of champagne. That was the moment I knew he had truly lost. Not the lawsuits, not the investigations. Not even the bankruptcy filings that loomed like storm clouds. No, the true loss was that Sienna, his golden prize, his reason for throwing away 2 decades of marriage, had left him. He was alone. Utterly, completely alone. Meanwhile, my world grew brighter. I walked through Dallas society not as the pitied wife, but as the woman who had endured and emerged stronger. At luncheons, I was no longer the subject of whispers, but the center of admiration. Grace under fire, they called it. Resilient, elegant, untouchable. They would never know the truth. They would never know that my grace was nothing more than sharpened, steel hidden beneath silk. I kept my mask because it still served me, but behind it, I allowed myself small private victories. The glass of wine at the end of the night, the quiet satisfaction of watching the empire he had tried to build without me crumble into dust. And yet, there was no joy in it. No giddy triumph. Only a cold, steady calm. This wasn't about happiness. It wasn't about revenge served hot, with screams and tears. It was about erasure. Grant Pierce no longer existed as he once had. His wealth was gone, his mistress gone, his reputation gone. All that remained was me. The night of the gala was clear and sharp, the kind of Dallas evening where the air felt heavy with money and perfume. The Pierce mansion, my mansion, was alight with chandeliers and laughter, the driveway lined with black cars and flashing cameras. It had been months since Grant's empire collapsed. By now, his name had become a cautionary tale, a whispered warning about arrogance and greed. He had vanished from Dallas society, retreating into shadows while creditors circled and investigators tightened their grip. But I remained. More than that, I thrived. As I stepped onto the marble staircase that overlooked the ballroom, all eyes turned to me. The navy gown shimmered under the light, the diamonds at my throat catching every camera flash. But it wasn't the jewels or the dress that drew their attention. It was the aura, the quiet power of a woman who had survived betrayal and risen. Above it, untouched, Charlotte Pierce, I heard one woman whisper. Stronger than ever. Yes, stronger and colder. I descended the stairs slowly, savoring the hush that followed me. Guests raised their glasses, smiling too brightly, eager to align themselves with me now that Grant had fallen. They asked about charities, about real estate investments, about the future. No one dared mention him, but he was there. Not in body, he would never dare set foot in this house again. But in whispers, in memories, in the unspoken acknowledgement that everything here had once been his. And now it was mine. I took my place at the head of the ballroom, the orchestra quieting as the host announced me. I lifted my glass, the room waiting, expectant. I want to thank you all, I began, my voice calm, smooth, carrying easily through the hall. Not for your generosity tonight, though it is remarkable. Not for your company, though it is cherished. But for reminding me of something I once forgot, I paused, letting the silence stretch, the anticipation sharpen. That strength is not given, it is taken, claimed, and once it's yours, no one can strip it away. The applause rose, like thunder, polite but charged, layered with admiration and something more. Something like awe. I lowered my glass, my gaze sweeping the room. In that moment, I wasn't the woman who had been betrayed, humiliated, discarded. I was the woman who had survived it, outplayed it, erased the man who thought himself untouchable. I thought of Grant, wherever he was now, alone, ruined, forgotten. I thought of Sienna, already chasing her next conquest, his memory little more than a stain she had washed away. And I thought of myself, standing here, not in their shadows, but in my own light. Justice had been done, not with fire, not with fury, but with ice. He had thought I was weak, he had thought I would crumble. But the truth was simple, I was never the weak one. The orchestra swelled, the applause thundered again, and I smiled. Not the brittle smile of the wife I once was, but the cold, certain smile of a woman who had taken back everything. The cold inheritance was mine, forever.